tell me about a time that you felt unsafe or excluded on a run. And this person wrote, every time I run by myself. Like, that to me is just mad, like, and incorrect. That shouldn't be the case. And I would say that that is not an isolated experience.
This is the Josh Lynott Project. Thank you so much for lending me your time and your attention. I truly believe they're the two most valuable assets in the world, so not for a moment do I take it for granted that I have both of yours right now. The goal of this podcast is to encourage you to slow down, take more risks, go after what you love, and ultimately appreciate the one percenters. The one percenters, as I define them, are the small, unexpected moments within your day that make you smile. So if you were to leave this podcast right now, I hope you've already got one thing to take away, and that's to look for the little things in each and every day. This podcast is sponsored by the JL Mentorship Program. If you'd like to work with me one-on-one, if you have a creative goal, a physical goal, a running goal, I'd love to be in your corner. And this podcast is also sponsored by my new book, A Note to the Runners, 42.2 poems dedicated to the runner, the highs, the lows, the triumphs, or maybe just running because you want to go for a coffee afterwards. I'd like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation as the traditional owners of this land on which we run on, which we're chatting on today, and which we live on, and how lucky we are. I'd also like to extend my respects to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, past and present. Today, as we share our own stories, we pay homage to the tradition of storytelling cultivated by the world's oldest living culture. So here we are for episode 095 of the Josh Lynott Project, coming to you from JLHQ, and it's a video today, so I can't even welcome the guest. But you know the drill, we always start with a poem, so I'm going to intro our guest first, Brit, with her poem.
Yeah.
Take it away.
All right. Did you have your phone? Did you tell someone where you were going or when you would be back? Did you have your headphones in? What was the time of day? Was the path well lit? I just wanted to run free, to run without worry. Why couldn't I do that? Why did the burden fall on me? That's it. That's my little poem.
How did it feel reading a poem?
Weirdly, I haven't written poems since I was in school, and I wrote one for my best friend's wedding when I was the maid of honour, and I couldn't formulate anything to put into a speech because there was just too much, and then I couldn't get this one line out of my head. And then I was like, let's do a poem. I guess I'm doing a poem.
So good.
And then when we were talking about this and you were like, we do a poem, I was like, okay, 2 poems in 6 months, let's go.
Trending up.
Yeah, I can write poems. I'm on a 100% increase from November last year, so it's good.
The best.
Yeah.
Brit texted me and was like, does this count as a poem? I was like, there's no rules.
Which is good because I didn't know them.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing.
No, thank you for having me. I'm excited.
I'm very pumped. I will do my poem and then we'll get into it. This poem is inspired by today's conversation, which you'll soon find out more about, and also inspired by an experience my sister had. Switching sides, left, right, car slowing, slower, slower, slower. Eyes focused in, not on the ocean, not on the moonlight. Heart racing, da-dum, da-dum. She doesn't run from left to right. She doesn't run at night.
Wow. I've been there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's pretty easy to tell what that's about.
I will go into this week's weekly update.
Yeah.
What you've been up to.
Yeah.
And then we'll get into this week's topic. But firstly, I met Brit at an exhibition last year. We've been, I think, in each other's orbit for a while and just slowly...
Probably a couple of years, just like ships in the night. Never fully connected, but always aware. And
just slowly getting closer and closer. And then, through my lovely girlfriend, I think we've actually got to like hang out a lot more. And I've been, even in the few times that we've got to spend, I always leave just like feeling, I guess, more educated, really. You always make me think about things differently and on some like really important topics, and I feel very grateful to have you here. Brit has her own run club, Flow State. I think Brit is a very bold, inspiring character, and a lot of people look up to you, and so pumped to have you here.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, it was a nice little meeting, wasn't it? Like, I was very overstimulated in that extremely loud warehouse that we were in, but I definitely like felt a connection with you because we were obviously talking about your friend that you had lost recently, and it ended up becoming like a language reframe, and I just was so grateful that you took that on board so easily and like without resistance and stuff, because it's like that particular issue to me is like something that really hits home. And so like anytime it comes up in conversation, whether it's naturally or if it's me bringing it up, which often it is, like I always like to be like, hey, like we can do this better, you know, like we can reframe our language to sort of have a better stigma around mental health and mental illness and all sorts of stuff like that. So I think like that for me was like, I was like, oh yeah, like I'm gonna be friends with this guy.
I'm still, very grateful for that shift. So, and I'm sure I'll learn a lot today. How has your week been?
Good, I think. I've had it's ARIA chart. I work in the music industry. It's ARIA charting week. We got the #2 Australian record yesterday.
Congrats.
So stoked. But it's always really stressful. Like you start the week off nervous and you get midweek chart updates every day, and you like don't feel good until 2 p.m. on a Friday when the chart comes out and you go, there's nothing I can do now. Like it's all good. But we got the exact result that we wanted.
Congrats.
Because unfortunately we knew we weren't going to get #1. So we were like,
#2
let's shoot for #2. That's basically our #1.
2's still on the podium.
2's on the podium. Yeah, I'm stoked on it. And it's like this band I've worked with for a really long time at my old job as well. They've been through a lot of changes recently. They got a new singer, which is just for some bands that's like the death nail in the coffin, but they've done really well to sort of like reinvent themselves, and they're feeling really good. And so like to be able to deliver that result was really good, but doesn't come without its stress. As I spoke to you, I was manually entering the data into a thing, being like, wow, I hope this is worth it.
Was it?
Yeah.
Great. That makes me happy.
Yeah, me too. If it wasn't, I'd be in a different mood today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So good. And how's your running been this week?
Yeah, I haven't actually run a lot this week, to be honest. I ran on Monday and ran on Wednesday, and then intended to run this morning, but was at a show last night and just like wasn't feeling good when I woke up this morning, and I'm not great in the heat. So I just was like, you know what, I'm just going to have a chill morning. It's not the end of the world if I don't go for a 10K on a Saturday morning.
Plenty more days to run.
Plenty more days to run, and it's like at the moment, because I'm not so focused on like racing or anything, like, you know, I haven't entered an event officially in ages, and so I'm just like running because I like running. So I'm not going to force myself to run if I don't have to.
I think that's just the most like beautiful mindset. It's just like, you don't want to do it, don't.
And it doesn't mean that you don't like running.
No.
It just means that you're like, I want to feel great when I go for a run. I know I'm going to feel horrible in 27 degrees when I'm really tired.
Yeah.
I will just wait. Exactly.
Brilliant. I think that's actually like getting pretty close to a good segue.
Yeah.
For today's conversation.
Yeah.
I want to keep moving on and into that segue. What do you think about before going for a run?
Before going for a run?
Yeah.
Lots. Definitely, like, one of the weirdest things that I think about is like what shorts I wear because if I don't wear shorts with pockets, I need to find like a running belt or a running vest or something where I can like put my phone and my keys and stuff like that and then I'll be like, oh, do I want to wear the belt? The belt's kind of annoying. Like these shorts are a little bit low rise and then the belt's like up around my waist and aesthetically I don't like that. But because I always have to have my phone with me, like for safety purposes, you have to consider that. And so like weirdly enough, like just clothing is like a huge aspect of like what I'm thinking about before I'm going for a run. And then just like making sure I can fit everything in and then also be as comfortable as possible once I'm out there.
And how often are you making a choice with your clothing on like this has to be more functional than comfortable or more functional than aesthetic because of like what you need to carry?
I think like, yeah, definitely more functional than aesthetic. Like, you know, it's nice to like feel, you know, like you've got a cute set on, but like ultimately like if the colours don't match or if I have to wear the running belt or something like that will take the priority over what it looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what else are you carrying or thinking about carrying other than a phone?
I mostly just have like my keys. I used to run with my ID, which is like, yeah, probably like a good lead into what we're going to talk about. Like I used to run with you'd be like, why would you run with your ID? That's weird. But like for me, it used to be when I first started running by myself, I'd be like, oh, I need this if like I'm by myself and something was to happen to me, you know, you watch true crime shows, like you pick up the wallet and be like, who is this person? Like, you know, it seems like a strange thing to have in your pocket, but like for me, it wasn't really.
Yeah, it was like a necessity.
Yeah.
Well, let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's get into the main topic of today. And again, I don't really know like what's going to frame it perfectly, but I would say today's discussion is like, how can we make running a safer place for women? And what can we think about? And I say we, and I really want to build this conversation with like, how can men approach running that makes it a safer place, more inclusive place for women?
Well, I think like probably a good place to start is like your poem that you said was inspired by an experience that your sister had, like almost line for line, apart from the ocean. Like I've had that exact same experience. And you remember these things like really clearly. Like I was only probably 300 meters away from my house in Brunswick. I was running down towards Princes Park and this man, it was stopped at the train tracks and he yelled something out his car at me. I didn't quite hear him, but I heard the word legs and I was like, oh yeah, great. And I gave him the finger and then he slams on his brakes and he was like, you fucking slut. And like held up traffic. This is at 3:00 in the afternoon, so like school pickup, people everywhere. He's holding up traffic, slowly following me as I'm like running down the side of Park Street. And I was, in my head, I was like, okay, like I need to lose this guy somehow. Like, you know, if he stops and gets out his car, like I don't know what's going to happen. So I made a quick decision to turn right because if I go right, he has to go across traffic and I can lose him that way and sort of route a different way home. But like there was multiple people around, no one intervened, no one said anything. Like it was all just like my decision to be like, okay, I lose this guy or I don't know what's going to happen. And like I said, broad daylight, like people around, close to home, all of the things.
Just a regular time to run.
Regular time to, well, you would think.
Yeah.
But like it happens so frequently and so often, and it's weird to me that people still are kind of surprised by those experiences. Like often you'll hear people say every woman you know has had a negative experience like that, and that's not a false statement. That's true. Like that's 100% true. Every woman you know has had some sort of run-in where they felt uncomfortable or unsafe, whether it's in running, at work, or just like out in public, like that's just the reality. And I think like why it's important to have these conversations is A, to just believe people, and B, just to have it in your consciousness, and especially as like, you know, as male runners, you have a certain level of privilege to not have to think about taking your phone and taking your ID and all that sort of stuff with you, because you're like, oh, that just, you know, I left my phone at home, like, oops, doesn't matter, I'll get it later.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
I can go.
You can still go, all that sort of stuff. And so like, just thinking about like stuff like that and having it in your forefront, and I think that already makes way for making things better for women, because if you're aware of these things, you go, oh yeah, we can wait, like, you know, we can go back together, or like, do you need that, are you okay without it, like all that sort of stuff, rather than being like, come on, let's go, like, you don't need your phone, that's silly. Like, you just can't say that to people, like, regardless of whether I'm in a group or not, like, I still have my phone.
Yeah, I'm so sorry that you had that experience, and definitely probably not just that experience.
No. No. Like, even like at Flow State, we'll be on the foreshore down, we're down in Albert Park, so we run down the beach area down there, and like, it doesn't matter if you're in a group, but if you're in a group of all women, like, people, a lot of the time we get like clap, run faster, like, good job ladies, or like people yelling out of cars at us and beeping at us and stuff, and it's like, people are like, oh, safety in numbers, and you're like, well, still no. Like, it doesn't matter, like, you know, there's so much like onus on women to, like, you know, kind of what I was talking about in the poem at the start, like, every time something bad happens to a woman, it seems like we always are asking these questions of like, what did she do? Like, you know, there's like the old trope, what were you wearing? Like, that's a tale as old as time. Like, you know, oh, she was asking for it, kind of thing. And it's just like, how, you know, did you have your phone? What time of day did you go? Like, these things don't matter. Like,
they shouldn't be questions.
It shouldn't be questions. It shouldn't be something that's brought up as like a way to sort of make people feel more comfortable with the fact that someone got hurt or killed. They'll go, oh, well, you know, she shouldn't have been running at night, really. Like, why can't I run at night? I'd love to run at 10 p.m. It would be great.
Ideally,
like, yeah, I'm a night owl. It's cooler in the night. Like, it would be awesome, you know. It's nice to drive past and see someone running at 10 p.m. and you go, wow.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Wouldn't that be great? But, yeah, unfortunately, that's just not a reality for us. And I think, like, it's something that the running culture in particular really needs to address, especially with the volume of, like, run clubs and new people to the sport and stuff like that. Like, it should be something we're talking about as we're bringing more and more people into the community.
I would really like to go into run clubs, and with that, considerations, because as we discussed going into this, it's like there's a lot of barriers, whether that's like what time a woman has to leave, and then again, like what time they arrive, the transport they get there, like we'll go into that. But then also, again, that's just on either side. But then I think there's a lot of things that run clubs aren't considering, which we would both really like, I guess, to like kind of open the lid on this conversation, be like, hey, if you do have a run club, if you're a male, like, start asking these questions, start thinking, start making these considerations.
Yeah. I think, like, I love running communities. I think they're great. I've met some of my best friends through running communities, and I think that they're so important to the sport, because it's like, it is a solo sport essentially. So, like, you know, finding the camaraderie and stuff in a community is really cool. What I think is the problem is, like, first and foremost, like, visually, when you look at run clubs, if they're not all female run clubs, there is a real heavy male skew. And whether or not that is because of the time of the run, or the location of the run, or the pace of the run, I don't really know. There's probably a lot of factors that go into it. But, like, one thing that my friends and I always say is, like, you can't be what you can't see. So, like, already, like, women feel excluded from run clubs because of just the volume of male content that's on your Instagram. And, like, I know that there's heaps of women at these run clubs. And so, like, just being more conscious of, like, elevating them and making sure that like visually they're represented on your social media, in your runs, like having them lead your runs and stuff like that, rather than just being like, you know, like everybody's here together and like Jim's going to lead like he always does.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I noticed like recently there's a couple of events on, and like the photography is always awesome and stuff like that, but like I often struggle to find the female representation especially in a lot of these like really like cool looking run crews that are like, you know, they're the people that like people aspire to be like.
Crews and brands.
Yeah.
Because this is like how this conversation started I was like, what I would like to see trend, I was like, I'd like to see women's safety become a trending conversation. Obviously not just move in and out as a trend does, but in brands and all of the brands that like going up and getting more attention, it's like they're so male focused in terms of their male athletes, their male cuts, but it's just like, but there's women doing incredible things better, like making up more of the group, whatever it is. It's like, but they're not being championed, they're not being shown. It's just like,
yeah, and it's like, why? Like, it is confusing to me.
And it's not a hard change.
No, it's not a hard change at all. And it's like, I think that you would see, if you start to sort of elevate women in these spaces and putting them at the forefront and putting them in the front, you'll naturally see the volume of like, you know, male to female ratio, it will just naturally start to shift, because there will be a level of comfort there and people will be feeling more safe in the space and everything like that. And it's like, I think sometimes people are genuinely surprised when you point stuff like that out to them, and they're like, oh, but like, we're inclusive. We're inclusive to everyone. And like, but are you really? Like, if you start at 6 a.m. and you run 4:55 kilometres, like, you already sort of take out a big whack of female runners, because one of the things we were talking about during the week with another friend was that like female runners don't like being in the dark by themselves.
Yeah, so that's what I was about to say. I was like, I think we need to make it even clearer why that's not inclusive, and because what goes into a 6 a.m. start as a female?
Yeah, like you might think that 6 a.m. is completely harmless, but it's not, because especially in winter when the sun is not up, there's this fear, especially if you're by yourself. So if I was to go to a 6 a.m. run club, I never would, but because I don't get up at 6 a.m.
But in another version of Brit,
in another universe,
an early rising
where
Brit,
I was capable of getting up before 8 a.m. but I wouldn't go, largely because I would have to rock up in the dark, and I don't know if there's going to be someone there before me.
Yeah.
And like, if that person is another woman, she's not going to get out of her car. I'm not going to get out of my car. We're not going to stand there together and wait for some other people to rock up, because even sitting in your car in the dark by yourself is scary. Like, so that will take out a huge chunk of female runners from coming to your run club, because like, that's just something that they think about, you know? And it's not, no one's doing it on purpose or doing it with malice. And I'm not saying that, but what I am saying is like pushing things by half an hour, like what's that gonna hurt, you know? Like, can we change it in winter so we can do it when the sun is closer to coming up, you know? Maybe 15 minutes before sunrise is the time that you go and start to arrive and stuff like that. Like, there's all these little shifts that you can do that will create a space that's a lot more welcoming for women and making women feel safe. And I don't want people to be doing it like they're doing us a favour. I think that is also a problem that sort of perpetuates itself when people adjust behaviours. They go, oh, there you go. And you're like, no, like, what do you mean, there you go? Yeah. Like, you can't, equality, everyone has a right to equality, and it's not fair that people should be excluded just because of like an environmental or circumstantial barrier, which is really easily changed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very easily changed.
Yeah.
And so that is just like the prelude, I suppose, to like getting to a run. And then what about once the run is underway and happening?
I don't often run with groups with males anymore. Like my run club is for all women and femme-identifying people. But when I have run with groups with males in the past, like often things I hear is like, oh, I can't run slow. Yes, you can. Like, that's a lie.
You definitely can.
You definitely can.
You can walk?
It's a false statement.
You can run slow.
But like I've heard people say in the past, like, and I think it actually was at an International Women's Day run, funnily enough, like, oh, so-and-so is not going to lead today because he can't run slowly. And it's like, that to me is just mind-blowing. Like, and a lot of women runners don't need you to run slowly, and you're not restricting yourself by just slowing down, but just being aware of like who's behind you and who's around and all that sort of stuff. And because quite often when you come to a run crew, like it is scary and it is nerve-wracking, and then sometimes you end up at the back of the pack or not even in the pack at all, and no one turns around. But what I do notice is like a lot of female runners will turn around because we're sort of conditioned to always be looking at our surroundings, right? Whereas like a lot of male runners, and again, like this is just like privilege isn't a dirty word. Like I think privilege can be bad if you're not aware of it, but like your privilege as a male runner is to be able to be like, I can just go for a run. I don't have to think about a lot of stuff. Whereas females are naturally more inclined to be checking like what's behind them, what's the side of them, because
what
like
are you carrying?
What are you carrying? Like, you know, because there's always the potential of a threat, and like so many people are like, oh, like I would never do that, but like the stats like 1 in 4, so it's like if there's 40 people at a run club, there's a good chance that there's some dodgy people there.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think just awareness of space is a really big thing, and again, it's a really small shift, just stopping or looking over your shoulder and being like, oh, that person's left behind. Like, you know, the last thing you want is anyone to be left behind, because they're not going to come back to your run club. Like, that's a horrible feeling.
Yeah.
But I just think it's like something that you need to train into your consciousness, especially if you're going to be leading a community.
Definitely. For me, in the way that coming from a competitive background, the way I've always seen run clubs is like, it's a social place. So like, why does a run club need to be fast? It was like, ultimately run clubs were made to like bring people together and bring community. So it's like a run club, I think, should have a sweeper. It should have the protocol to be like, all right, what happens if we cross a road? What happens if the pace picks up? Do we have people that are going to regulate it, make sure no one's been left behind? If someone's like stops for the toilet, like wait for them. Yeah. Don't be like, haha, like they got to catch back up. That's terrifying.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, run clubs, whether you have one, whether you are starting one, it's like, can you take a moment to pause and be like, what are we doing to look after everyone in this group?
Yeah, because like there could be plenty of dudes that can't run your 5-minute Ks either, but they're going to try.
Yeah.
Like, whereas a girl's more likely to be like, fuck that. But then, you know, feel shit and scared at the back of the pack. But I think like also with run communities, there's nothing wrong with having a performance-focused run community, but like, you know, as long as it is what it says on the tin, right? Yeah. Like, I think the kindest thing you can do to people is tell them the truth. Yeah. So don't say all welcome if it's not all welcome. Like, I really respect people that are like, oh, we do this is the pace that we run, like this is fast, like it's going to be fast and we're not going to apologize for that. If you want to come, like, you know, but you need to preface it with that so people are aware of what they're going into.
Definitely.
I think because like a lot of the time, like growth and numbers is something that we sort of struggle with a lot as runners. Like, you know, you're constantly looking at statistics and all sorts of things, and so you do naturally be like, oh, like bigger, better, faster, better, all that sort of stuff. So it's like it's easy to fall into that trap of like, I've got to, you know, make sure that my run club is as big as possible. And so to do that, I say all welcome. I'm just going to blanket it like that. All welcome. Everybody can come. Yeah. We're going to have a big group. It's going to be awesome. And like, if that's like what you want to do, then fine. But if you say all welcome, then you need to be doing those things that we talked about before, like the no drops, the sweepers, the awareness of your surroundings.
The timing.
Maybe you have 2 groups, you know, a briefing beforehand, and then the time of day is a consideration that you have to say when you say all welcome, because if you say all welcome and you run at 5:30 a.m, it's not all welcome.
All welcome. Yeah. And even like with discussions that I've been in with friends, it's okay if it's a 7 a.m. start and you're a female, you don't want to get there early because you're then again standing by yourself. So it's like also having this like period of grace as such, or like, because it's like, all right, the group is here, now it's a safe place.
Yeah, don't leave it like 7 on the dot, because someone might have been hanging back for 5 minutes just being like, oh, I'm just going to like, you know, I'll be a bit late because I want to wait till the sun's up. I don't want to be sitting in the car park by myself.
Yeah.
So like, having a grace period is another super easy thing that you can do that makes it safer and more welcoming for everyone. Just to be like, hey, you got 15, it's like going to a restaurant booking, right? Like you get 15 minutes and then you lose your table. Yeah. Like, you know? Like,
here's the grace period.
Yeah, I think that's just a nice, easy thing to do. And again, like that's for everyone. Like, you know, when we talk about feminism and equality and stuff like that, it's not like people being mad at each other. It's just people being like, they just want the same experience. And I don't think that that's a bad thing.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
Coming off my run today, I was just like, to love running, and this podcast was like, to love running is to like actually be able to like allow everybody to love running.
Yeah.
And it's what I hope this conversation sparks, is like, all right, I have a lot of privilege. I don't necessarily think about it until I'm in a conversation like this. How can I spread that and be like, well, what conversations can I have with the males around me to be like, all right, start considering this, because it's like, I want to see you love running. I want to see my sister love running. All the like, just women to be able to do, like, love it. But it's like you can't unless we like...
No. Well, like we're talking about when I got here, we're doing this event for International Women's Day with a friend of both of ours. And one of the things I wanted to do was just like for women to submit their experiences and like anonymously. So I don't know who's put them in or anything like that. And what we're going to do on the day is actually read them out. And just to make everyone feel extra uncomfortable, Shay's going to read them out. Because like, how often do you hear these things come out of a male's mouth? Like, I think it will really sort of flip the narrative on its head and be like, oh wow, like I hadn't thought about that because I never would hear it from my male counterpart, and it feels different when a man says it. But one of the ones that stuck out to me the most, like some of them were quite long and quite in depth, but there was one that just jumped out at me. It was one sentence, and the prompt is, tell me about a time that you felt unsafe or excluded on a run. And this person wrote, every time I run by myself. Like, that to me is just mad, like, and incorrect. That shouldn't be the case. And I would say that that is not an isolated experience.
That's not a one-off.
Nah, it's not a one-off. Like, you know, so often, and like, again, we're encouraged to run in groups and run in pairs and all that sort of stuff because safety in numbers, but it's just, it is really sad to me that that is an experience of someone that I potentially know. And like, yeah, it breaks my heart.
Same.
Yeah. And I just like, I don't want that person to feel like that. Like, I don't want to feel like that. Like I said to you when I got here, you were like, what do you think about sometimes? And I'm like, sometimes I think about that if something was to happen to me, you could identify me by my tattoos very easily. Like, that's just weird, a weird thought, right? But it's not. And so like...
Because every woman has had a thought.
Because every woman has had a thought like that. That's why I used to run with my ID. That's like why, you know, it's often why I run in the same places. Like, you go somewhere, you have a bad experience, you're not going back there. Like, it takes one time, and then that's, you know, 10 kilometres of Melbourne knocked out, you're never going to go back there again. Like, and you might have had great experiences up until that point. Like, there's a wetlands in Brunswick that I used to really enjoy going to. Like, you can sort of zigzag your way down from a house, and like I pretend I'm a little trail runner on the dirt tracks. I'm like, yay, not on the road today. But and it's beautiful. Like, I mean, I'm petrified of birds, but it's nice to see them at a distance.
Yeah.
Like, but there was one time I was running down there, and I haven't been there since. There was a man sitting on a bench. He had a carton of milk, and he stood up as I ran past and started to follow me. And when he realised I was running, he started running. Luckily, I was like, I'm definitely faster than this guy, and there's a soccer match being played just across the road. I know that there's people over there.
Yeah.
So I just like picked it up. You can see it, like the time on my Strava. I think I ran like a 4-minute K, which I don't do. But I was being literally chased by a completely unprovoked. All I did was try and enjoy a space. I've never been back. Like,
That zone's
all
cleared.
gone. Yeah. Different route. We'll just go around Princess Park. Safe there.
Just becomes so isolating in the
Yeah.
places you can run.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it's heavy.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to hear it, right? Like, and to really address the reality and sit with it and be like, I don't know what that feels like, but I know that it's not good. And I'm not asking you to know what it feels like. I don't think that there's a line of comparison that you can draw. Like, there just isn't.
There never will be.
There never will be. But what we all need to be better at doing is hearing it, and rather than asking questions, being like, yep, how can we... The question you should ask is, what do we change to make that not happen?
Mm-hmm. How do we start getting more men to think about that and getting that question? And like, I think for me what comes up first is just to the immediate women in your life, your partner, your sister, your mother, like your friends, being like, how do you feel on a run? Like, I asked my partner that. I was like, what do you actually feel when you're out running? Like, do you ever feel unsafe? And chatting to you, being like, what comes up? And I think when you chat to the women closest in your life, you actually then have like a very real experience. Like, my sister telling me about this time she ran at night, again, close to where she lives. Car follows her, never runs at night ever again.
Yeah, it takes one time.
Yeah.
I think asking questions is the best way to address a lot of this, and like being comfortable to ask the questions and give people an honest answer. You and I had a conversation on a run where I said, how often do you think about women's safety? And like, you guys very honestly were like, not that often. But a lot of people will say, oh, all the time. I think about women's safety all the time. It's top of mind. Love it. But like, I mean, tell me the truth, right? And like,
I don't.
Yeah.
And it's, and even after having these conversations, I still don't.
Yeah.
And an example of that is like, you gave me some really good things to think about. It's like, when I'm overtaking a woman, give them space.
Yeah,
like, don't just brush past their shoulder. And then I was on a run today. the other day in a group, and I was like, I just ran past that lady like centimeters off her shoulder. I just chatted about this with Brit, and I've gone and done it again. And it's like, yeah, it was in the middle of the day, but it's like, as you said, it's like, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like, you know, Samantha Murphy, she went missing at 2 p.m. Like, you know, it doesn't matter what time of day it is. But I think, like, you're okay to learn and make a few mistakes along the way, as long as you keep being like, oh yeah, shit, I didn't do that again. But, you know, you obviously had the thought afterwards and you're like, okay. So that's like, hopefully one step to like getting better and being like, next time we'll give them a wide berth, because like, you will notice that people flinch when you go close to them. And it's not like, you know, hearing footsteps come up behind you is scary. Even if you're like, I'm on a running track, of course there's going to be footsteps behind me, because you just don't know. Like, I don't know the man that is running behind me is not
Yeah.
a threat.
No.
Like, I don't know. I can't definitively say that. Like, so to be aware and to ask these questions and make these behavioural changes and stuff like that will just go such a long way into making people feel safer. And be honest with yourself and be like, okay, I never thought about this, but I want to now. Like, now I want to. So what can I do? I'm going to start asking questions. I'm going to start inviting women to runs, and I'm going to ask them to be like, hey, like, you're in charge of this one. I'm going to follow along, and like, we're going to do it your way.
Yeah.
And you bring your phone, and you bring your ID, and you place your keys through your fingers, and then like maybe you'll feel how we feel every day, and then that will prompt you to, you know, give people space and change the time of your runs and be like, oh, you know, we were going to run at 6 a.m. with the boys, but maybe we want the girls to come too, so we're going to do it at 7. Like, it's just little things.
In a broad, and it's like the meeting point under. You gave a really good example of, I think it was called Eyes on the Street.
Yes.
If you could explain.
Yeah, so
that.
there's this friend of mine is an urban designer, and we actually did a podcast a while ago on women's safety from like a environmental perspective. And one of the things that came up is there's this concept in urban design called Eyes on the Street. And so that means like a pathway or a road or something, and the amount of people that can see you. So for example, if you're on a street and there's houses on either side, it's a flat level space, there's plenty of eyes on the street. There's very likely, you know, someone sitting in their front room, or there's going to be a lot of foot traffic or stuff like that. The way a lot of Melbourne running paths and cycling paths are designed is there's no visibility on people. Like the Mary Creek's a really good example. It's basically a valley.
Yeah,
like,
a very steep valley.
Yeah, there's no houses and stuff there. Like you genuinely can't see someone if they're at the bottom.
So there's no light. It's basically like soundproofed.
Yeah. Yeah, you like over water, you know, if the water's rushing, like that's loud as well, it will muffle out sound and stuff like that. And so like that's a really notoriously bad place for women to run. I don't know if you're aware, but there's a Facebook group about the Mary Creek Trail where women will be like, hey, this time today there was a creepy guy down there, avoid. Like, that's a thing that exists. And it's come up countless times in groups where people go, oh no, I don't run there. Yeah. I would love to run there. I love the Mary Creek Trail, but I can't. Like, I've had run-ins with people down there. I give it a couple of goes. If I'm in a big group, I'll go down there. But like, I miss it, you know? I would love to just cruise by the water and it feel fine, but it just doesn't. And that is largely because of the way it's designed. Like even other parts of the Capital City Trail, you'll notice that a lot of the bridges are covered over. And so like even that, it seems so minor, but you're like, oh, well, you can't see, even if there's no visibility. So there's no eyes on the street there, even if there's cars going under that bridge constantly, because they can't see you. So like those spots, they're all blind spots, and like probably, I would say over 50% of the Capital City Trail is like that.
It's blind.
Yeah, it's a pretty, like, not that I'm not a distance runner, I have no aspirations to run the entire Capital City Trail, but if I did, like, you know, it's...
You need to put a lot of things in place to be able to do it.
I'd be like, okay, like, probably have to do it at midday, probably need to have some friends, like, you know, it's not just get up and go for a run. Yeah. It never is get up and go for a run.
When we, like, just on the thought of putting things in place, like we had this discussion with Shay the other day of what goes in, like for a woman to run a 3-hour marathon versus a man running a 3-hour marathon, the amount of things that have to go in place. And again, it probably sounds like maybe we're repeating ourselves, but it's like, I just want to make this so clear in this episode. It's like, for a woman to run a 3-hour marathon, it's like, okay, you can't just go and do a long run on the Capital City Trail. So it's like...
So where do you do your long run?
Yeah, where do you do your long run? Okay, you can't run in the morning, you can't run after work. So it's like the small pockets. Yeah, and particularly as it gets closer to winter, it gets shorter and shorter and shorter.
Yeah, and you have a full-time job. That becomes really hard because you're like, oh, duck when I leave, duck when I get back. Like, and like, you automatically and through no fault of anyone other than just the environment and the fact that there is this very real risk of violence against women, female runners who are training for these big events, who need to put a lot of hours and stuff in, they lose this time. So they're always going to be at a disadvantage because they can't go at 5 a.m. or they might go at 5 a.m. and they might be terrified the whole time, which is like not an experience that anyone wants when they're training for a marathon. Like, especially if you're training for your first marathon or you're training for a PB, like you still want to enjoy the experience of training.
You don't want to have the whole training block in fear.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just like, I think a lot of people don't, again, think about that sort of stuff. And so like, yeah, training groups, being aware of those sorts of things. And it's crazy when you just lay it all out in front of people, you sort of go, oh, wow.
Yeah, it's like a lot has to go into that.
Yeah, there's a lot of thought and a lot of extra layers of things that need to go into a woman's marathon training. And so like it almost makes their like efforts more impressive because it's like
far more like
it's like, how did you do that? Like through adversity you got here and you smashed it, and like that's awesome, but wow, like you had some barriers along the way.
Yeah, a lot of barriers. There's just a few things that I want to touch back on before we actually go into some of the barriers. I think that's a good segue. One thing that's like come up since running with you is like, we ran the other day and you're like, what's the route? And I was like, I didn't think about the route. And we just made it up on the fly. Again, just not something I ever think about, but it's like when you're running with women, sending a route, and not because they ask for it, but just ahead of time be like, hey, this is where we're running. Is this a place that you feel comfortable to run? We obviously talked about giving space and not just brushing a shoulder, but actually giving like, same way that cyclists need like 2 meters on the side.
Yeah, meter either side.
Yeah.
Like that sort of thing. Like, yeah, your proximity to someone is like, can be quite threatening, you know, whether you mean it to be or not. And often you don't mean it to be. But like, being so close to someone and like having them, like I said, the sound of footsteps following you, and then like someone like touching past you and stuff is like, will heighten senses and heighten fear in female runners because like you said, like I said at the top, it's like, it's not everyone, but it's 1 in 4. So like, that's pretty good odds.
Yeah, and in a big group, particularly these groups with like 100, it's like, that's a few.
Yeah, exactly. It's like there could be anyone in there, and it's like, you know, we see it in the media and stuff like that, and they go, oh, you know, the guy was a firefighter, and you're like, so? Yeah. They were a cop, so? Yeah. Like, they still did it.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
We continue to be surprised by those sorts of things, and so like, yeah, just as the men in our lives, just being like, I want to make it clear that I'm not a threat, and this is an easy way I can do it.
Yeah. The next one is, as we said, the time.
Yeah.
Just making it actually more accessible with light, with the grace period and waiting. Extending invites to the women in the group, but not just like chucking it in the group and in the group chat, being like, hey, reaching out me like, this is our run.
Yeah.
We'd love you to be there.
We'd love you to be there. We'd love for you to come along. Just like reaching out individually, because you put anything in a group chat and like be like, oh, I did it, you know, everyone's invited, but like having someone reach out to you directly, it just feels so much nicer and you feel safer. Like, you know, when I know that you go for group runs and you'll send me a text and be like, hey, we're going at 7:15 a.m. and I'm like, you have fun with that. But you know what I mean? Like, I knew that was part of a group, but like the fact that I was like individually invited was like, I was like, I'm welcome here and I'm safe here, and that feels nice, and so more of that should be done. Like, it's awesome to run with your peers, like of all genders and all backgrounds and stuff like that. Like, we should all communicate together and run together collaboratively. It's cool.
That's the dream, right? Yeah. Next one is for the women that you have in your life that are whether they're training for something or not. It's like you don't have to run at 5 a.m. to be training for something.
No.
But being like, hey, would you like company? It's like, okay, if you're not a runner, it's like maybe you have access to a bike.
Yeah.
Just cycle next to them.
Yeah.
If you are a runner, be like, great, I'll join you at that hour and be like, hey, what do you need for your run at the time you're running, at the place that you're running?
Yeah, like, can I make your run feel better? But like, and there might be women that say no, and that's fine as well. Like, I think people need to understand that, like, there might be some women that are like, you know, I don't feel great running at 5 a.m, but I'm really determined to do this on my own, and that needs to be respected as well. But I think just offering and being like, hey, I see that you're training super early, do you want some company? And not be like, oh, because it's unsafe. Like, just as a genuine offer, be like, hey, would you like that? And they'll be like, wow, like, that's really nice. And they might take you up on it, they might not, but like, the fact that the offer is there, that already goes to sort of like bring that inclusivity into the space.
Yeah. And then last one, and there's going to be like so many more takeaways, but on this little list is visibility, and it's like, champion the girls.
Yeah.
Like,
Put
give
the
them some
girls
airtime.
Yeah, girls at the front. Let's go. Like,
give them the camera. Give them the like front cover of a carousel.
yeah. Don't put them at the back. Like, it's awesome to see like women. Like, women are incredible. Like, they're incredible athletes. They're awesome at the sport, and they deserve to be equally celebrated. Like, go through your Instagram and be like, can I do better at this? Like, what is the male to female skew of content on my Instagram? If it's 70-30, let's bring it up. Like, let's do 50-50. That would be great. Like, you know, and like, just those little things of like, oh, I'm posting this. Is there a better photo? Can I, you know, like you said, put the front as a woman every second time you post or something like that. Like, it's so easy and it's so little, but it's what we talked about at the start is just like the visibility, and making a space inclusive is making people see at face value that women are welcome here.
As someone who loves words, I guess visibility, we just talked about the foes, but is there any kind of like words that could be used to like pair with the photos? I think like we kind of touched on it, being like, oh, this is all inclusive, but I guess it's probably like being clear with your words.
Yeah, I think so as well, and just like, just making sure that your language is like gender agnostic, right? Like, not being like, yeah, bro, like, you know, like, and it's so easy to do because it's just like, you don't think about it, and that's the thing, is like, you just want to think about it a little bit more and just be like, how does this read to someone else? And like, ask people, just be like, hey, like, does this sound okay to you, or is it a bit like, yeah, the boys, like, you know? And that's all we want, is people to like ask us our opinions, ask us how we feel, and like, then react appropriately to that, rather than shutting down and being like, oh, that makes me feel uncomfortable, I don't like that, I don't want to think about that. Like, you know, no one's criticizing you for the way that you do your Instagram or anything like that, but all I'm trying to say is that it can be better, and it can be more equal, and there's no reason why it shouldn't be. Like, if you can give me a reason why it needs to be an 80-20 skew, I'm all ears.
But otherwise?
Otherwise, I can't think of one. So.
Yeah.
I think just, elevating the women in your community and giving them opportunities and stuff without having to be asked, I think is the key thing for all of those things, is like doing them without having to be asked is huge.
Thank you.
That's okay.
Now I'd love to chat about the barriers. And we've kind of, you sent them across, and we've got, I'll just go through them, but the first one's like the emotional barriers to running as a woman.
I think like fear is like the big emotional driver for women, and like the big emotional barrier. So like, whereas like you might experience joy 80 to 90% of the time, our experience of joy will be a lesser percentage, because sometimes there's that experience of fear. And like, you know, I think that sort of emotional barrier, it sort of has another layer to it, because it it takes longer to fall in love with the sport, or it's easier to fall out of love with it because of something like that. So like, yeah, like your emotional attachment to running could be really positive or really negative, and like there is a higher skew of women having negative experiences to running because of fear, and like whereas like a male might have a negative experience of running because he got injured a lot.
But it's again the weight of an injury is like it's just not comparable to like the weight of being scared for your life.
Yeah, correct. And that's like a real thing. I just really want to drive that point home, is like there have been many times that I have been scared for my life, and there has been many times that a lot of women have been scared for their life. Going for a run, like let that sit with you for a minute. I just went for a run, thought I was going to die. Yeah.
There's nothing I can say.
Yeah, and you don't have to. Like, I don't think that. I think it's important not to draw comparisons or try to and be like, oh, that's like when I, because it's not.
It will never be. Yeah. And yeah. I think with that, because you asked me, you were like, oh, have you ever like felt like you're going to die? I'm like, oh yeah, there's been like this situation, but like that situation is like dangerous to everyone.
Yes.
And that I think is a comparison that many men will try and like quickly like almost rebut with.
Yes.
It's like, don't.
Yeah. Just don't.
Yeah.
It's not the same. And like, you know, I'm sorry that there was a situation that you felt unsafe in your life, but like there's, like you were in an unsafe environment, right? Like theoretically any environment is unsafe to females.
Yeah.
Their homes, their running routes.
That right there is like theoretically any environment is unsafe is, I think that's what encapsulates this whole discussion.
Correct.
And what we're trying to work towards not being.
Yes.
Like, how do we make any environment feel safe?
Yes. Yeah. Truth.
The next one is the barriers surrounding circumstances.
Yeah, I think we kind of touched on it with like, I think circumstances just like, you know, the timing and the like, it's just the circumstances under which people are meeting for a run, right? So like, what time is it? Where is it? When is it? How many women are there? Like, those are all circumstances, and that circumstance is something that like can just happen, or it's like something that can be manipulated as well. So I think that like, yeah, when you're taking a step back and looking at all these things, you can be like, oh, again, that's a reason where people are being excluded. Like, how do we fix it? How do we change it?
Yeah. Brilliant. Environment? Environment,
I think we covered as well. Like a lot of these things, I kind of like this because we've kind of already fed into it all, and it's just like bringing it back and tying a little bow on it. Environment is obviously like the discussion of spaces where we operate. So like the capital city trail, running routes, all that sort of stuff, just being aware of like how an environment can make someone feel unsafe. And often it is just purely a visibility perspective, or it's that they've had a bad experience in that space, and just being aware of that.
I don't know whether to bring it up in environment. I may bring it up in placed by others, so I'll get to it because I think it'll open another tangent. Physical,
I mean, like, I don't like being like, oh, women are naturally slower than men. I think like women are more comfortable with being slow or like running easy. It's not even slow. I don't like using the word slow. That's a banned word at Flow State. Yeah. We don't use that. But like, I think women are more okay with being like, an easy run needs to be easy, right? Whereas like,
I think that's the better frame, right?
Yeah.
Because like slow is slow, and even actually easy is relative to everyone. It's like, like someone who is trained a lot, their easy is different to someone who runs.
Well, your easy is different to my easy, right? So like, you know, just being aware of like physical barriers, like how much does this person run? What's the volume of their running? And can I, as the more experienced runner, adjust myself to fit with what they're doing? so we can all run together and move together. And like you can, it's so easy to slow down. It's great slowing down. Yeah. It's really nice. It's
like, yeah, and I would really like to challenge people on that. It's just been like, again, why can't you run?
Why can't you?
Easy. It's like if you're coming here to socialise, that's what you're optimising for, not performance. So like let go of performance today and be like, I can move that.
If you don't want to put it on Strava, take your watch off.
Yeah.
Leave it at home.
Yeah.
If it's going to ruin your flow.
Yeah. Brilliant. Barriers, or were there any more that you wanted to talk on physical?
No, I don't think so. I think it's just being aware of different abilities and stuff like that. Like physical barriers, you can, it's easier to slow down than it is to speed up, and just being mindful of that.
Brilliant. Barriers placed by yourself.
Yes. We kind of, again, we've covered a lot of this. Like barriers placed by myself is like, I can't run there. I won't run there. I don't feel good there. I can't run with these people because I'm not fast enough. I can't run with these people because I don't see myself in this community. And like some of that's on me, and some of that is on sort of factors into a lot of the other barriers that we're talking about. But like women will place a lot of restrictions on themselves to try and make sure that they're feeling safe in the environment. So those barriers will exist for whatever reason. It's not often something that we want to exist. It just, you're like, oh, I can't do that, or I won't do that because I don't feel good doing it.
Yeah. And I guess the tangible takeaways that we went through before is to really try and to alleviate some of those things.
Like help people break down those barriers themselves by making your communities a place where, you know, those sorts of things are more unlikely to exist.
Yeah. And then placed by others.
Yeah, this is an interesting one because I think a lot of the barriers placed by others are unconscious. Like what we were talking about before, like how often do you think about it? And like I am in no way saying that any of this stuff is intentional. I want to be really clear. But I think that unknowingly male runners place barriers on females just by existing in the space. Yeah. Like, and just by doing your thing, going for a run, not thinking about the girls, the walls are up, whether you mean it or not. Like that's just the reality of the situation.
One that we talked about, for instance, run club culture, a lot of guys taking their shirts off. Yeah. What that does to the women in the group, the others in the group, and how that's just like, almost like unsolicited. It's just like, okay, did you think about how that might make everyone else feel? If it's a hot day and a woman can't or doesn't feel comfortable taking a top off, like...
It's just little things like that, right? Like it's just like, I would look at that and be like, oh, must be nice. Like, you know, because like plenty of times I'll run in a t-shirt when I'm uncomfortable and hot because someone yelled at me driving past when I took my shirt off, because for some reason like a woman running in a crop top is like some hypersexualized thing. And like it's just those little awarenesses of like how your privilege is displaying itself in the run community. And like I want people to feel comfortable and be like, you know, feeling their best when they're running, but like sometimes you have to be like, well, how does that make other people feel? Like, are they comfortable with me doing that? Like, it's just a little thing. Like, do you have to do it? Yeah. Can you wear a different shirt?
Yeah. Can you wear something lighter?
Yeah.
Can you check the weather beforehand?
Yeah. Maybe you shouldn't have worn a long sleeve. Like, you know, it's just little things in it, but it's like, we can't do that. And so like, to make us feel more included, sometimes maybe you should feel a little bit uncomfortable as well.
Yeah. Which isn't really a huge thing to ask.
Not a big ask, I don't think.
Why I was, put an asterisk next to this topic was because it's like, when we talked about what's on the tin before and being really clear, and I think, again, this may be a big topic, but we'll see how we go, is coming back to the dating culture around run clubs. And we talked about this out of the podcast being like, it's okay if it's clear. But if it's not clear, what that does is like if a female rocks up to a run club and just actually wants to run.
Yeah, and unbeknownst to her,
Yeah.
there's 20 dudes that are like, I'm here for a date.
Yeah.
Like, where are the girls at? Like, that already creates an unsafe environment. There was heaps of articles last year dating, like, run clubs are the new Tinder, like, all that sort of stuff. And, like, I'm fine with it, but you need to make it safe. You need to have the women coming and being aware that there is the propensity for that to happen. Mm-hmm. Maybe you should register people that are coming to these runs if, like, you know, God forbid someone went on a date and something untoward happened, or, like, there's so much risk for women to feel harassed if men are going there thinking that they're going to pick up. Like you said, if someone was like, oh, I just thought I was going for a run, and like this guy was like asking me for my number, I don't know who he is, he's running next to me with no shirt on, like, that's awful. Like, that's not a good situation to be in. But I like the idea of people connecting through something that they love, but I think you need to be very clear about what the parameters are around it, because, like, just being like, oh, there's heaps of hot chicks here, like, awesome, let's go. And there's often like a pack mentality as well around, like, pickup culture and all that sort of thing. And so, like, then again, without meaning to, the run club becomes a threatening environment to women, and they're not going to go.
Yeah. And then
how do you
that
stop it?
That perpetuates so many more things as well. It's like the women not going, then the run club's 70-80% dominated by males. Yeah. And then again, how that affects the visibility, everything.
It all plays into each other. Yeah. And so, like, all we need to do is, like, even out the quantities of both genders, all genders participating in run clubs, and all walks of life, all skin colours, like gender non-conforming people. Yeah. The more of them we see in the communities, automatically all of these unsafe barriers start to break down. Like, that's just how it works.
Is there a world, do you think, where we should look at, like, capping the numbers on run clubs?
I think the larger they get, the less control you have over the environment. And, you know, even from, like, just a pure, like, group safety perspective, you can't possibly keep eyes on 300 people. No. Like, that's really hard.
Yeah, it's easy for one person to go missing.
Like, you'd be like, oh, I wasn't sure if they were part of the group. Like, you know, it's actually really hard to control a large group of people, which is why when things get really big, they become a public event, and you have to put all these procedures into place to be able to manage big groups. And so, like, again, just like volume of people is like, it's hard to cap it, because it's like, you don't want to be like, oh, you can't come, because, you know, like, you want people to be able to go. But, like, being aware of how big groups shift dynamics and shift safety for members that are showing up is, like, something that should be front of mind if you have a large run club. Like, even 50 people is big.
And then even if you are attending a big run club as a male, being like, come back to these, like, takeaways and being like, oh, okay, the female balance could be 60-40, but within this micro setting of the run club, this female is surrounded by 6 males. Maybe I should shift my position.
Yeah, how am I presenting in this community, and how does that make the female runner feel? Yeah. And like you said, or being like, hey guys, like, back off a little. Yeah. Give her some space. Yeah. Like, and she might go, no, it's fine. But the offer, again, means so much.
Yeah. And that's something I'd really love to see men be more comfortable doing as well, and being like, not, I guess in some ways it is calling out, but not in this, like, aggressive way, just being like, hey dude, can you just, like, do you want to come over to this side? Do you want to drop the pace? Like, can you think about this? Yeah,
it's just a reframe, right? Like, it's exactly what we talked about when we first kicked this off. Like, how we met was a reframe. Like, you said committed suicide, and I said, we can't say that. We don't say that, because committed in that sense has a negative connotation. So we say passed from or died by. And, like, all of these are just reframes. Like, it's all it is. It's just a little shift, and, like, reframing your environment, reframing your behaviour, just to make it better for everyone. And it's better for everyone. It's not just better for women. Like, again, you're not doing us a favour by doing all of these things. Like, you're making it more inclusive for everybody.
Everyone.
Yeah. And you, like, the dynamic will shift and you'll have an awesome run club.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It lifts everybody up.
Yeah. And that's what you want, right? Like, that's the goal, I think.
Right now, that's what we're striving for.
Yeah.
I think I feel like we've touched on some pretty like solid things today. I guess I would like to wrap this up by asking you like what you love about running.
So I'm only like, I guess kind of new to the sport of running. I started running in COVID, like everyone did, running and baking bread.
Good combos.
I don't bake bread anymore, but I still run. But what I like about it for me is like ability to process things. And so that's why it's like so important for me to help create these spaces where I feel safe running by myself, because sometimes that's all I want to do. And sometimes that's like I have my best ideas, or like I've got, and there might be like a moment of grief or a moment of like poor mental health and something, and all I want to do is be by myself and go for a run. So that's why these conversations are important, because that's what I love about running, and I don't ever want to lose that. Like, I don't want to feel like I can't do that, and to have that taken away from me, I'll probably find a different sport.
Yeah, and I don't want to take that away from you either, because I also share the same things. And it's like, but my privilege is I can go and run at 9 p.m. to process. It's like, hearing like what you love about running is like what I want to protect. What I want people to take away from this is be like, all right, what do the women in your life love about running?
Yeah, ask them.
Yeah, and then be like, okay, how do we like make this available to you?
Yeah, agreed.
Well, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. Thank you for sharing your experiences, your knowledge, your wisdom, and just what's inside.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. And I'm always grateful for the opportunity to speak. Like, I never want to speak on behalf of people, but I can speak from like my own personal experience and shared experiences with others. So, it's awesome to just get it out there and get people thinking.
Thank you. Well, that is a wrap on episode 095 of the Josh Lynott Project. The best thing that you could do is share this episode, share it with your run club, share it with other males, put it on your story, put Brit's face on your story, champion the girls. I would love it if you could give this show a rating, but the best thing for this episode is just let's get it around, let's get the art of reframing happening, let's start a bigger conversation, because everyone deserves to feel safe and to love running. And thank you so much for listening, and thank you, Brit.
Thank you.